What if the biggest moment in the entire Outlander universe still hasn't happened yet? Think about it for a second. After all these years, after all the pain, the time travel, the wars, and the impossible love stories, what if Claire still has one final reunion waiting for her? Because the more I think about Blood of My Blood Season 2, the more convinced I become that the writers are hiding something massive from us. And honestly, once you connect all the clues, it starts to feel impossible to ignore. When Outlander officially came to an end, most fans believe that was the final chapter of Jamie and Claire's story. The last season gave us emotional moments, heartbreaking goodbyes, and the kind of ending that felt satisfying while still leaving fans emotional. But at the same time, something about season 8 felt very different compared to earlier seasons. There was suddenly a huge focus on Claire's parents. And I don't mean just one or two quick mentions. The show kept bringing them up again and again, almost like the writers desperately wanted the audience to remember them before moving into the next phase of the franchise. Every time Claire talked about Henry or Julia, I kept waiting for something bigger to happen. I honestly thought the show was preparing us for a shocking reveal near the finale. Maybe Claire would finally learn what truly happened to her parents. Maybe someone connected to them would suddenly appear. Or maybe the series would end with one last emotional surprise that connected the main story directly to Outlander. Blood of my blood. But none of that happened. And strangely, that almost feels more important than if it actually had happened. Because think about it. Why spend so much time reminding viewers about Claire's parents if the story was truly finished? In television, writers usually do not repeat something over and over unless it matters later. Especially in a universe like Outlander, where almost every detail eventually connects back to something bigger. That is why I honestly believe Season 8 was quietly planting the seeds for what comes next. And what comes next may completely change how fans see this entire story. There are really only two explanations here. The first possibility is simple. Maybe the writers only pushed Claire's parents into the spotlight because they wanted fans excited for Blood of My Blood. That would make sense from a marketing point of view. The prequel focuses on a different generation, so naturally they would want longtime viewers emotionally invested before the new season arrives. But personally, I think there's something deeper happening here. The references felt too emotional and too carefully placed to be random promotion. I think the writers are setting up Claire's future appearance in the prequel itself, and the reason I believe that starts with the final moments of Season 1. That ending was not just dramatic, it completely changed the direction of the story. We saw Julia, Henry, and baby William standing near the stones while danger closed in around them. The Grants were practically seconds away from catching them. You could feel the panic in that scene. Henry knew they had no time left. Then suddenly he grabbed Julia's hand and pushed her toward the stones. And right there, the entire fandom started asking the same question at once. Would the stones actually work? Because in the Outlander universe, time travel is never simple. It always comes with rules, risks, and painful consequences. One of the biggest rules involves gemstones. Travelers usually need gemstones to survive the journey safely. And while it's possible that Henry and Julia secretly had gemstones hidden somewhere, there is one massive problem people keep forgetting. Baby William almost certainly did not. And honestly, that detail terrifies me. Because what happens if the stones only work for Julia and Henry? What happens if they travel through, but William gets left behind? Just imagine how heartbreaking that moment would be. Julia reaching the other side only to realize her child never came with her. Henry desperately trying to go back. The stones closing before they can return. That kind of emotional pain feels exactly like something this franchise would do. Outlander has never been afraid to destroy its characters emotionally before rebuilding them again. In fact, some of the most unforgettable moments in the series came from families being torn apart across time itself. But even if all three of them successfully travel, another huge mystery appears immediately. Where exactly do they go? Most fans automatically assume they would travel directly to Claire. It sounds obvious at first. Claire is their daughter, so naturally people expect a reunion. But I actually think the writers are smarter than that. If Julia and Henry suddenly appeared in young Claire's timeline while she was living with her uncle, it could completely interfere with the emotional path that eventually leads her toward Jamie. And we already know fate is incredibly important in this universe. Claire's destiny always pulls her toward Jamie Fraser no matter how impossible the odds become. That's why I think Season 2 may choose a much more emotional path instead. What if Julia and Henry arrive in an entirely different timeline? A place where they survive quietly for years without knowing what happened to their daughter. Then much later, after Claire's journey with Hammy is already complete, the story finally brings them together. Just picture that scene for a second. Claire standing face to face with the parents she never truly knew. Years of grief suddenly crashing down at once. Questions she carried her whole life finally answered in one emotional moment. Honestly, that could become one of the biggest scenes in the entire Outlander franchise. And the emotional weight would be unbelievable because Claire's entire life has been shaped by loss. She lost her parents young. She lost time itself. She lost years away from the people she loved. So giving her one final reunion after everything she suffered but Ma would feel like the perfect reward for her journey. But this is Outlander, which means happiness is never guaranteed. Because there's another possibility here, and this one is much darker. What if Julia and Henry never escape at all? The Grants were already hunting Henry down before the cliffhanger even happened. If the stones fail, then Julia and Henry could easily end up captured. And if that happens, Season 2 could become far more brutal than fans expect. The villains in this universe are rarely merciful, especially when revenge becomes personal. That is why I'm genuinely worried about Julia's fate if she falls into their hands. And then there's William. If the Grants capture the family, they may decide to take William away entirely. Malcolm is gone, the clan is desperate for stability, and a child connected to that bloodline could suddenly become extremely important. Imagine William growing up surrounded by the very people who destroyed his family. Imagine him being raised to believe he belongs with them. That kind of storyline would be tragic, emotional, and incredibly powerful, and knowing this franchise, it would fit perfectly.